Let's talk all about AI in business. It's hosted by Brent Muller. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Future Proof Podcast. I'm your host, Brent Muller. I got a really exciting guest today. I'm going to introduce Kelly here in 1 second. For those of you just joining the podcast, we're Vallejo Growth Partners. We specialize in helping B2B and SaaS companies figure out how to implement AI where it can either save them 40 plus hours a month or add 15 or more additional sales conversations. So if you want to learn more about that or just see how you can take your company to another level just by implementing AI in the most biggest pain point place, just grab a consult call with us. You can see it below, or you can drop the word growth in the comments or DMs and our team will get back to you. But let's get to today's episode. So let me introduce Kelly Kovack from BeautyMatter. Kelly, thank you for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brent.
Yeah, really exciting. So first, Kelly, as we always start, let's talk about your background, your founder's journeys.
Sure. In many respects, I think I'm an accidental founder / entrepreneur. So I've been in the beauty industry some 30 odd years. And I guess I've only had two real jobs, if you call a real job working for someone else and getting a paycheck. I've had a number of incarnations of agencies, from concept to counter to marketing to strategic agencies. I've started a couple of my own brands with partners. Was a nail lacquer brand. One was a fragrance brand. I have had some pit stops along the way. Working big stage brands. So, I think in many respects, I have led the life of a founder, but I suppose it's much more of an entrepreneur. And, I think, and those things are intertwined, but I think also very different sometimes.
Very different, but you're right. You can't have one without the other, but yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah. I mean, actually, all of the businesses I've started have been self-funded, for better or worse. I have been on teams and worked with investors or brought concepts to life that involved fundraising, but nothing I founded. So I think, I think there's sometimes people forget that most startups fail. And that's not a bad thing. I think it's just a matter of how you frame failure, right? So I never thought of anything that I did as a failure. It had a beginning and an end, and the end may not have been what I wanted. But it was a stepping stone to the next thing.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because I spent the bulk of my career on the brand side of the beauty equation, either building them or building them for other people or acting in an advisory capacity for startups. To sort of, brands, big conglomerates, and kind of everything in between.
Right.
And BeautyMatter sort of was a byproduct of all of that. So BeautyMatter is a B2B media and intelligence platform. We service beauty and the wellness ecosystem. And for us, it's not just about the brands and retailers, it's also about the value chain that supports brands and retailers. That's often forgotten. It occurred to me one day that beauty, as large as it is as an industry, didn't have a very robust B2B ecosystem from a media perspective. I didn't know why. I didn't really know what to do with the information, but the information kept knocking around in my head.
I'm glad you're saying this, Kelly, because it's not just beauty. The B2B space lacks a lot of that backbone that you're talking about. But no, I want to hear more about what pertains to beauty.
I think that's part of it, right? I think at a time where beauty brands and CPG brands were really gaining steam, it was also getting much more competitive. And I just kept looking at archaic the value chain was. So, while brands and retailers were talking about transparency, suppliers were saying, no, that's my IP, I'm not sharing it. And I'm like, yeah, no one cares. Figure it out. And so they're all part of the same industry, but they were kind of evolving at very different paces. So there was, I thought, a tremendous amount of information that was happening from the brand and retailer side that could be applied. It had to be applied to the supply chain. And so I don't know. I guess I have a nose for white space, meaning, I like to make my life more difficult than it is. But so I found a way. These two guys came to me from an ad agency. They wanted out. I needed what they were doing digitally. And I said, listen, I have this idea. Plan A is there's a business here. I don't really know what it is, but I think there's a business here to build. Plan B is I'm totally wrong. No one cares. But we still have an agency to market and we'll use it for that. And so being able to bring it to life relatively inexpensively, because I had the skills internally to do it, and I had a purpose for it rather than, I think so. I went ahead and made the investment in time and money to do it. And so it entered the world with this plan A and plan B, which those are not plans. And we launched in 2016 to 5,000 people. I had in a database from, being a consultant for a couple decades. My inbox exploded. Well, immediately I knew that I was onto something. They were making comparisons to sort of a legacy publishers where I was like, that's insane. We're 3 people. Right. So I didn't have a plan. I was super busy. We just did it on the side for 4 years, knowing that eventually there would be a time that I would focus on the business. But until that point, it was a lot of pretending I didn't have a plan because people would ask.
Yeah.
And just testing and learning and figuring out why people were making the comparisons and evolving from curated content to sponsor to original content. And I think that was the biggest blessing for this business because there was no financial pressure on it to evolve. It organically had 4 years to be kind of what it was meant to be. And it also established this really sticky community that we had never asked anything of. The monetization, going from everything is free to you now have to pay, was a little painful, but we navigated it. So there was a moment in time where I was ready to dive in and run this business. I found someone who could help me. I'm very good at concepting brands, bringing them to life, and them look bigger than they are. Not so good on the operations side. I lose interest, and I know my way around a P&L, but I'm not the best. Found someone who could help me build a business under this thing. Yeah. And that was about 2019, right before the pandemic. And so we are a global B2B intelligence platform. We're about 20 people, and we do digital publishing, and then we also do live events.
Very, very cool. So fast forward now, right? Mm-hmm. Talk to me about how the industry has evolved, because like I said, I could go through so many B2B industries where outdated and legacy are an understatement, right? Yeah. On the B2B side. And it's so funny to talk to, unless they're in the SaaS world, right? They're just steeped in 90s stuff, right?
Well, I think you're being kind.
And that's being kind.
I think so. Yes. I think that's being kind. So, the interesting thing is, the mindset of like a business decision that happens kind of while you're in your office, and the decision you make as a consumer, they're not terribly different, right? Yeah. When you go through, you want things, you want service, you want products that work. You usually gravitate towards relationships in making those decisions. And I think that, so very often people are like, oh, B2B is different. Like, it isn't. You're still marketing to a decision maker. It is not any different. Yeah. And so I think that, at least in beauty, what we're starting to see, so most of our partners initially were not from the usual suspects in the B2B ecosystem, because we would talk to them about that we started everything with content, and they looked at us like we dropped from another planet. They're like, yeah, no, we do trade shows. I'm like, okay, how much do you spend on that trade show? And what's the ROI? Right. So, in some respects, COVID made them more open.
They had to wake up a little bit when trade shows went away.
They did. But a lot of them have gone back to their old ways.
Which is shocking to me, right, Kelly?
It is.
Because I'm in a lot of other B2B industries, right? So what you're saying is resonating like you can't believe. Because I'm
Yeah.
like, I had a client just to make it even crazier. And I said this to him, and I know I offended him, but I was on purpose.
Mhm.
But he's like, Brent, I need, because we own a data company, like another, that's one of our other companies. And they're like, Brent, I need phone numbers so my team can cold call. And I went, Mr. Client, with all due respect, do you know what year it is? Right? Yeah. And I said, have you even thought about the return on investment? Have you even tracked how many calls it takes you to get somebody on, and then how many,
Mhm.
well, like, do you even track at least your metrics? And they're like, no, this is just what we've always done. And so what you're saying is exactly, like, it makes my head explode, because you're right. B2B and B2C should not be that different.
They're not.
Yeah.
And so I know how to build brands.
Yeah.
And so I also had a lot of people, they're like, I want to work on the brand side. I was like, but we are building a brand.
Mhm.
And so there's also sort of this distinction that B2B businesses aren't brands. It's like they are brands. There's
100%.
different kinds of brands, but they've never
Right.
been treated like brands.
Right.
And so, at least in beauty, we're starting to see that happen a little bit. Like, we work with a lot of ad tech and marketing tech companies,
Yeah.
and they market like brands. And the reason that we do well with them is because we've owned and managed these businesses. So we help them adapt their technology solution to a beauty specific client. And, even with our events, so we just had an event last week and there were 450 people there. And so you also have this idea kind of in the B2B ecosystem when you're talking biz dev that I need more names, I need more contacts, more emails, more. And it's like, no, you don't need more. You need
the right ones. Right.
Well, you need the right ones.
Yeah.
And so when people look at us, they're like, well, you're not as big as your competitor. And I was like, we may not be as big as our competitor, but I would put against theirs anytime. And we are super sticky. And so it's valuing quality leads over quantity. So there's a lot of kind of legacy thinking, I think, that can be applied to B2B. And I think in the tech space, it's happening better than in some of the kind of more traditional kind of
I call it
manufacturing
SaaS, but you're exactly
space.
right. The tech space is where you get it.
Yeah.
But you know what's really interesting? I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because what I'm thinking right now is that if I think about your industry, beauty might be the first really smart bridge from B2C to B2B.
Yeah.
Outside of technology, because you're closer, because they're most of your clients, they're selling to consumers, right? Not that there's not tons of other B2B space, but the B2B companies, a lot of times that I'm talking to, their average order value is somewhere between 30,000 and 100,000, right? And upwards, right? So that's a much longer sales cycle, right? And so I get some of their thinking. The problem is, to your point, if they understood you need less but the right people, that's where data and AI can help them, and so much better. But I'm going to be interested in watching how you navigate this, because you're like the poster child of teaching the rest of the B2B industries this is the right move, right? Is to treat it much more the same, not different.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, we have a super high retention rate with our partners. We tend to do better when they trust us. But we've shown them the power of content, be it a webinar or a piece of written editorial, or, the participation in, a live event, doing a curated dinner. At the end of the day, where we sort of live between the brands and retailers, the investment community, and then the supply side for us. So anyone who provides a good or service to a brand or retailer, and we're in the middle and we make the connections between all of them. And I think that, I also don't think that you can just sit behind a computer or behind a phone and land business that way. It's like deals happen like that, face to face, old school, grab a drink, have lunch. Like, it is still really, really valid. And in some ways, I would say more meaningful.
Yeah. The upfront stuff can do all the heavy lifting to make more of those conversations happen in the right way. I agree.
Yeah.
And if you talk to anybody in the B2B space, especially a founder or CEO, they just say, if my sales team, who are awesome, because everybody thinks their sales team is awesome, whether they are or
Yeah.
not, and they still, right? Because they know the product, they know their
Yeah.
product line. But they said, if I could get with the right people, will the revenue grow? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's why
Yeah.
we focus everything on all that other mundane stuff, right? To get that, which is the pre-education, the stuff you're talking about doing is, and honestly, it comes from the world that you're coming from, the branding and the education. And I love that.
Well, and I think it's also, very often, well, and it's not only, I was going to say in the B2B space, but it's not, it's a way of selling. A lot of people want to get an ROI. So they feel like they need to like sell, 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 sell. And it's like, actually, you know what? You're going to have better conversion if you don't sell and you share knowledge.
Yes.
We
Give,
actually
give, and you will get.
And sometimes we'll turn people away when we think their expectations are unrealistic because we don't want people to not have a good experience with us.
Yeah.
But sometimes people think there's misalignment or they're just not being realistic. But for us, we actually have requirements. It's like you got to show up and behave the way our community wants to receive you because we also respect our community. Right?
Yeah.
So us getting someone to show up to a dinner or to show up to a webinar or to open an email, they do it because they know we don't waste their time. So if someone comes on and starts doing a sales pitch, well, that's not what we're about. So now that affects our community. So we are laser focused on respecting sort of our community and what their expectations are. And so, in B2B, that's the branding piece, right? That's kind of the soft piece that you get no ROI on is thought leadership, showing up, building relationships, and leveraging third parties to tell your story for you. And then you get more qualified leads. And if your sales team is as good as they are, they should close faster.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. And I love the give to get because you really don't even have to worry about the get. If you give enough,
You
it
will
just
get it.
happens. Yes. Yeah. And I think that gets lost on a lot of folks because, like you said, their mindset, the old school mindset was sell, 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 come over the top. And I'm like, you don't need to do that because of what's available. Actually, what you have to figure out is how am I giving value? Right. And if you give value, it's just reciprocation. That's just the way the world works now.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I do think there's definitely a place for technology. And I think it's about, working more efficiently. I think there are tools that can be used where you can sort of vet businesses sort of at what stage they're in. Like, is there a fit for the size of the business and the size of your solution? So there's lots of ways to use technology to work smarter. But I think that coupled with a really human approach, our team is handwriting note cards to every one of our sponsors. A very analog way to say thank you, but it breaks through the noise.
Hugely impactful. Yeah. Hugely impactful. So tell me a little bit about how you've seen the beauty industry change over the last few years and where you see it's going.
So, I mean, the beauty industry is, it is massive. It's very resilient, much more resilient than a lot of other consumer categories. I think that what beauty is seeing is not terribly different than a lot of other consumer categories. Consumers feel strapped. They're looking for value. Value doesn't necessarily have to be price. It is a category that has gotten incredibly competitive. And over the past 10 years, the investment community found beauty. So
I think they found every single industry.
Yeah, I think it changed beauty a lot. There was a time where most businesses were self-funded or kind of bootstrapped with angels until they hit scale. Then private equity would get involved. It was a much slower process. And when D2C came around, people saw the margins and the exits, and they were like, "I want a piece of beauty." And I think what happened was a lot of brands got launched that weren't they weren't brands, they were products. They scaled fast. And it just created an unrealistic set of expectations. I think that money has moved through the industry or cycled through. So the investors that are sort of at the venture stage are much smarter than they were 10 years ago. So I think we're seeing a little bit of a return to how brands used to be built. There's sort of longer horizons, like 3 to 5 years of built a brand. Most brands don't get built in 3 to 5 years. You're at that point, you're just selling products. But so we're sort of seeing brands being a little bit more thoughtful, much more focused on sustainable growth and profitability. So the days of growing at all costs have gone out the window.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of the impact of technology has been really interesting in beauty. And I think it's not different than a lot of other CPG companies, but AI specifically is impacting how products are being developed. So what used to take 18 months and tons of research, you can
Right.
use AI and build a very good product brief in a couple days because you're sort of assimilating mountains of information. And when you layer social listening into that and trends, I mean, product briefs are probably better than they've ever been,
Yeah.
done faster because of AI.
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing AI applied in two ways, like through the supply chain, just speeding up the product market timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Samples are better because the briefs are better, they're faster. There's a lot of automation being applied in manufacturing. So, there's a fragrance manufacturing company that's building their first manufacturing facility, and it's going to be mostly robots. And so they will run 3 shifts, where most manufacturers just run 2 shifts.
Right.
So, I mean, that's on one end. And then on the other end, there are a lot of brands that are playing with AI to optimize advertising, creative marketing. It is all sort of, I think the brands that are doing it well are using the AI as a tool, not the solution.
Yeah.
But I think it's happening a little slower on the marketing side and maybe a little bit faster on the manufacturing side. But it's changing the way we all work.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, and I'll have to send this to you, but we had someone on the podcast, and I'm so apologetic right now because his name is escaping me, but they have a company that actually uses AI to refactor how they produce it with the best ingredients. It's only for CPG stuff, but they are using AI to figure out how to formulate better. And it runs through not just the ingredients and the makeup of it, but also the supply chain part of it. So they optimize. And I'm like, man, I never thought of that. That's incredible if you think about it, right? Because then it's just saying, hey, you can do this and this, but if you do this and this, you can get it done quicker and cheaper, and you're not losing anything in the right in the makeup of the product. And I'm like, wow, I would not have.
Yeah, there's something similar. There is a platform that once you launch your product, so you've done the initial and you've launched it, commercialized it, and you're looking to optimize it. They have this global database of manufacturers. And so they know who the best mascara manufacturers are in the world.
Right.
And so you start looking at your supply chain by your hero products and having sort of a more global footprint than you may have been able to historically. I mean, for us, it's a little different because we're a platform and an intelligence platform. So, there are plenty of media companies using AI to do their writing. We will never do that. But we do use it. I mean, we had our conference last Thursday. We took all of the recordings, dumped them into sort of an AI platform, them sort of transcribed for us, had them sort of pull out key learnings, and then we took it from there. But this is something that would have taken us weeks before, right? We would have listened.
Right.
So we definitely use it as a tool, but we will always be sort of on the editorial side, kind
And you
of
should be. And
very
I would
human
recommend that to
created.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're using it the right way. Like, again, we call them digital coworkers, right? It's
Yeah.
to take the menial and mundane tasks and get that off your plate so you can do the important stuff.
Yeah.
Like you said, it would have taken you weeks to do all that stuff. And all you really wanted to do was pull out the highlights.
Yeah. I mean, some other things that we're toying with is like creating our own sort of data pools. So,
Hmm.
we'll take all the earnings calls and we set them up in a closed environment. So we're kind of creating our own resources that will then for the year go reference earnings and stuff like that. So we use it more to organize. And our entire team, the leadership team, we made a commitment that we were each going to learn about AI. And so different teams are using AI differently. Um, and sort
I love
of,
that.
integrating it where it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of saying that AI is not an IT function; it's a strategy, and every department needs to use it to their best and most optimal use case. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree. So, Kelly, I told you I was going to ask you a couple selfish questions. One is, what are you doing as a founder to make yourself more productive that other founders and CEOs would find useful?
Yeah, it's taken a long time, but I think being productive and being busy are two totally different things.
Yes, they
So
are.
I try and set up my morning where that is my time. And even if I decide to work, I don't take meetings until 10 o'clock, which sounds very luxurious, but
Yeah,
it's just setting the morning up right. I don't look at email when I wake up.
smart.
I so it's more about sort of me spending time with my husband, setting up my day. I walk to the office. It doesn't always happen that way, but that's the intention. And then also sort of having days during the week where my time is blocked out. So it's either I'm writing on those days, I'm working on projects that are a little bit more sort of long term, or they require sort of dedicated thinking. So, I usually block out a day for that. Usually block out a day for mentoring and networking. So the time I'm spent is sort of focused on something specifically because I have a habit. My husband tells me I think I'm a multitasker, but I'm really not. Instead of ping ponging around. So,
Yeah.
trying to add some structure and live by the structure, I think has made me more productive. And delegating, I think delegating is not something that I've always done well. But when you have a good team, letting them run with the work and realizing and using that resource that you're paying for that's right in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. Love that. And to me, that's like not enough founders do that of siloing off, right? And blocking the time. And, I work with a ton and I can tell you that that is an Achilles heel for most of them. So that's very good advice. I love it. I hope you can keep that up.
I try every day. I don't succeed every day. And it's taken me a long time to do it, but it really does make a huge difference.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So last question, right? The insights that, I said most
Yeah.
founders come to us for one of three reasons, right? Either sales team stretched too thin or like we talked about, right? They're not getting enough of the at bats that they want. The content they're producing is not driving enough of the engagement they want, or they've heard about AI and they just don't know where or how to implement. So in your world, which of those three resonates the most?
I think
Or they could be option four, right? Which I'm okay with.
yeah, no, I think definitely the AI piece, and I might expand it beyond AI
Yeah.
to other technologies.
Yeah. We could say emerging tech because there's so many.
Yeah, it is because I think that there is a lot of noise, if you will. right?
Yes.
So what was it 3 years ago where it was like metaverse.
Yeah.
And then 12 people were hiring chief metaverse officers. Those people don't exist anymore, I don't believe.
Right.
12
I
months
don't know
later,
anyone using metaverse. Right.
right. And so I think when it comes to emerging technologies, for me, it is learning enough about them to decide, is this worth spending time trying to implement? Is it
Yeah.
something that I'm going to watch and learn? I think the watching and learning should be continuous. Then you should, I feel like people feel like if they don't jump in, they're going to miss out and they're going to lose a competitive advantage. But it comes down to bandwidth at the end of the day. And I think, AI, so it's huge what it can do. And so I think it was,
You got to boil
I
it
think
down, right?
you got to boil it down to how it relates to your business. And usually because I'm not naturally tech inclined, I usually try and have conversations with smart people. And I sort of tell them my perception of what it is and how I could be using it. And then I let them correct me and point me in the right direction. And so I've had lots of conversations around AI with super smart technologists who have boiled it down to such common sense. I was like, is that what it is? So I think sometimes it's just like finding translators around you who can help make sense of it. And sometimes waiting it out to see.
Yeah. I say be careful of waiting too long, but because I don't disagree with you, right?
Yeah.
What my thought is it's different than I always relate it to the cloud, right? Everyone's just said the cloud got so much hype in the beginning, but it was something you could wait on because they were figuring it out, right?
Yeah.
The AI impact of taking away the menial stuff, to me, that's where you start. If I could sit, like, and again, we do this, but I'm saying anybody can do this, is if you can save your somewhere where you can save 10 hours a week, right? We say, first use case should save you 40 hours a month. It just in one department. It doesn't need to like shock the world. But if you could get the menial tasks off of something that is one of your most frustrating areas where you're like, oh my God, if we just didn't have to do that, it'd be great. To me, that's how you implement it. It's not something that you just say, oh, I have to rechange or remake one of my departments or anything. No, you need to say, how can I free up my best resources to do what I really want them to work on? Right? Like, I love your earlier use case, right? Where you're like, man, if we would have had to just after that event go through all that stuff, that would have taken weeks, right? If I could just build a workflow to do that and never have to think about that again, that's where you start, right?
Well,
we always say that to our clients.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I look and see at sort of some of the tedious, monotonous things we're doing, like finding the right quotes and content, editing video, even podcasts, I'm like, okay, go see if there's an AI solution for that.
Yes.
It is not going to do it for us, but it will get us close enough that
80%, right? If it could do 80%. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and you know what? I might coin that, the 80-20, right? If we could do 80%, right, then that's 80% you didn't have to do.
Yeah. And so I think thinking, at least for me, thinking about, is there an AI solution out there that can be part of this flow?
Yeah. I love that that's your thought process.
The answer may not be yes or no. And then it's like finding out what it is, how much it's going to cost and all of that. Yeah. But thinking of like, can we insert an AI tool here to make us more efficient?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's simple things out there now. One of the bad parts, I think, is that there's just so many tools went onto the market and they're all just trying to beat each other. And I'm like, and it really makes people shut down. And if you get through all that and you just figure out where's one of my most monotonous things that I can take off, just to me, that's the best place to start. I got to tell you, Kelly, I'm really enjoyed this because one, we're kind of in similar spaces in the ad tech part of it and platform space, indifferent, but I'm going to definitely collaborate with you in the future because
I would love to.
I love it. Love what you're doing.
Yeah,
and I love how you did it through the community.
Listen, I think community is everything, and community can live online. They're really powerful when you kind of bring them in the real world. I think communities are the biggest way to future-proof your business.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, that's why we named the podcast that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, thank you so much. And I know we're going to put all the links to get, but if there's somebody out there that says, I want to try Kelly's platform or talk to her, how do they get in touch?
I'm pretty easy to find. LinkedIn is a good way to do it. Our website is beautymatter.com. And yeah, LinkedIn or Instagram, easiest ways to get me.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you very much. This wraps up this episode of the Future Proof Podcast. Your competitors are not sleeping on implementing, emerging tech like AI. You should not either. But to what Kelly and I talked about, start small. We always say start small. And the goal is to change the plan, but never the goal, right? So the plan can change, but not your goal. And don't let this take you off track. But that's the best advice. Anyway, Kelly, thank you for spending time with us, and we're really excited to see what the future holds for you. All right. Bye, guys.
If you're ready to embrace change and lead with innovation, be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Future Proof Podcast.